Hi there. Are you ready to relax and fall asleep? Let me tell you a little story to help you drift off peacefully. The rain poured down, a relentless torrent against the dungeon Esarusted bars. The first summer rain was as cold as a blade, lashing through the darkness. A suffocating heaviness filled the air, a grim mixture of blood, rust, and damp earth. In the heart of that freezing gloom, Cillian knelt upon the stone floor. Heavy iron chains bit into his wrists, the skin torn and split, his blood seeping into the rainwater that pooled around him. His head was bowed, his thin shoulders trembling slightly, but his back remained stubbornly straight, a posture of dignity that was almost cruel in its defiance. Footsteps echoed from outside. Crown Prince Ungen entered, his white cloak speckled with rain, the silver blade at his waist glinting in the torchlight. He stopped 3 paces away, looking down with a gaze so cold it was unbearable. "You still refuse to speak." Ungen's voice was low and steady, each word a heavy stone upon the heart. Cillian slowly lifted his head. Under the wavering torchlight, his face was deathly pale and his lips were cracked, yet a faint curve lingered there, a ghost of a smile. "There is nothing to say, Your Highness. You betrayed me." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and final. Cillian gave a hoarse, quiet laugh, like the sound of wind scraping against a blade. "If loyalty is betrayal, then I accept it." A chill gust of wind swept through the cell. Ungen's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. For a fleeting instant, something flickered in his hunger. Regret, perhaps even fear, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You know I cannot spare a traitor." "I know," Cillian whispered, his voice steady. "Then why do you smile?" Cillian looked up, his gaze clear and calm, terrifying in its serenity. "Because in the end, I'd die by the hand of the one I love in that moment." The world narrowed to the flash of steel. The sword pierced his chest, blood burst forth, a shockingly bright and warm crimson that soaked through his torn robe and dripped, slowly, onto the cold stone floor. Cillian lowered his head, the faintest smile still upon his lips as his vision blurred. "If there is a next life, I will not love you again." The rain outside fell harder and harder, as if trying to wash away the sins of the world. Ungen stared as he collapsed, his mind a sudden, stark, blank, utterly wordless. And so, he died, carrying with him all the silence, all the promises that had never been spoken. When Cillian opened his eyes again, there was sunlight. Soft, gentle light filtered through gauze curtains, and the faint, familiar scent of incense lingered in the air. His hand trembled as he touched his chest, the place where the sword had plunged through his heart. He felt only smooth skin. Then, a voice came from beyond the door. A voice he knew all too well. "Master Sia, the Crown Prince awaits you in the rear pavilion. His Highness wishes for you to accompany him to the enthronement ceremony." He froze. He had heard those exact words once before, 3 years ago, just before everything fell apart. What was this? A dream? A trick of the mind? Cillian sat in silence for a long, long time, the sunlight warming his skin but not his heart. Then, a faint smile touched his lips. But this smile held no warmth, no affection. It was as cold as melting ice in the dead of winter. He had returned to 3 years ago, when he was still the adopted son of the Grand Chancellor. The quiet shadow who stood behind Bianjan, watching him, listening to him, believing in him with a foolish, blind devotion. This time, however, would be different. This time, Cillian would no longer be that gentle, forgiving man. He would not make the same mistakes. The past was a scar, and he would never forget the blade that left it. In the days that followed, Cillian moved through the grand estate like a ghost. He performed his duties with impeccable precision, his manners flawless, his expression serene. To the outside world, he was the same devoted Master C. But inside, a storm was raging. He avoided Ungen whenever possible, offering polite excuses and deferential bows. The Crown Prince, busy with the preparations for his ascension, didn't seem to notice at first. He was accustomed to Cillian's quiet presence, a constant, reassuring anchor in his tumultuous life. He took it for granted, but then He began to feel it. A subtle distance, a coolness in Silan's eyes that had never been there before. One evening, he found Silan in the library, transcribing ancient texts. "Silan," he said, his voice softer than usual, "you've been distant lately? Is something troubling you?" Silan didn't look up from his work. He carefully finished a character before setting down his brush. "Your Highness is mistaken. I am merely focused on my duties to ensure everything is perfect for your The words were respectful, but the tone was flat, devoid of the warmth that once colored their every interaction. Anjen frowned. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the scroll. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Slowly, Silan raised his head. His eyes were like placid pools of water, reflecting the lantern light but revealing nothing of the depths below. There was no adoration, no hint of the deep affection that used to shine so brightly. There was only calm, unnerving politeness. For the first time, Anjen felt a sliver of unease. This was not the Silan he knew. This was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Come," Anjen said, his voice a little tight. "Walk with me in the garden." He expected obedience, as always. Instead, Silan gave a slight bow. "Forgive me, Your Highness, but this text is of great importance and must be finished by morning. I cannot afford to be distracted." The refusal, though polite, was a quiet shock. Silan had never refused him anything. Anjen stared at him, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. "I am not asking." The words were a quiet threat. Silan's expression didn't change. He simply picked up his brush again. "Then I must beg Your Highness's forgiveness for my dereliction of duty." He dipped the brush in ink and began to write, his hand perfectly steady. His focus was absolute, as if the crown prince of the realm was nothing more than a mild breeze. Anjen stood there for a long moment, watching the elegant script flow onto the paper. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He didn't understand what had changed, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was losing something he never even realized he possessed. He turned and left the library, the silence behind him heavier than any argument. Silan did not watch him go. He simply continued to write, each stroke of the brush a step away from the man he once loved, a step toward a future he would forge for himself. The gentle scholar was gone, replaced by someone with a will of tempered steel and a heart of ice. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this story helped you feel a little more relaxed. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories to help you unwind. Sweet dreams and good night.